Have you ever noticed that the more you try to fix your life, the more distant you feel from yourself, as if something essential has quietly slipped away while you were busy surviving, pleasing, chasing, and enduring? Buddhism teaches that suffering often begins not because life is cruel, but because we slowly abandon our inner home and forget how to return. This teaching is not about becoming someone new or reaching a higher version of yourself, but about remembering who you were before the noise, before the pressure, before the endless expectations. Inner homecoming is the sacred act of returning to your own presence, where nothing needs to be proven, earned, or explained. Today's lessons are not instructions to escape life, but gentle reminders guiding you back to yourself, where peace has been waiting all along. 1. You were never lost, only distracted. Buddhism teaches that your true self is not something fragile that can be broken or lost, nor is it something you need to rebuild from scratch. It is more like a clear sky that has always been there, even when it looks hidden behind thick clouds. The clouds may appear heavy, dark, and endless, but they never damage the sky itself. In the same way, the confusion, stress, pain, mistakes, and disappointments you have experienced did not destroy who you are at your core. They only covered your awareness of it for a while. When life becomes overwhelming, people often say, "I feel lost." But Buddhism gently reframes this by saying, you were never truly lost. You were simply pulled away from yourself by constant noise, pressure, and expectations. Most of the time, this distraction happens slowly. It begins when your attention moves outward toward approval from others, the need to be understood, the fear of falling behind, or the belief that your worth depends on achievement. Over time, you become so focused on managing life, surviving emotionally, and meeting expectations that you forget to check in with yourself. You stop listening to your inner voice, you ignore your exhaustion, and you push down your feelings just to keep going. This is not failure, it is a very human response to a demanding world. Buddhism never blames you for this. Instead, it invites you to notice it with kindness. Inner homecoming starts with a simple but powerful shift in awareness. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" or "Why can't I be better?" you begin to ask, "Where has my attention been all this time?" You may realize that your attention has been living in the past, replaying regrets, or in the future, worrying about what might happen. You may see how much of your energy has been given to pleasing others, proving yourself, or controlling outcomes that were never fully in your hands. This realization is not meant to create guilt or self-judgment. In Buddhism, noticing without judgment is considered wisdom. The moment you become aware of your distraction, something gently shifts inside you. You are no longer lost in the noise, you are observing it. That observation itself is already a return to presence. You do not need to force change or fix anything right away. Simply noticing where your attention has been is like turning on a light in a dark room. The room was always there. You just could not see it clearly before. Awareness brings you back into contact with yourself, not through effort, but through gentle recognition. Buddhism teaches that coming back to yourself does not require dramatic transformation. It begins quietly, in moments when you pause, breathe, and realize, "I am here." Each time you notice your mind wandering and softly bring it back, you are returning home. Each time you choose awareness over self-criticism, you strengthen that connection. In this way, inner homecoming is not something you achieve later in life. It is something that starts the moment you notice you have been distracted. Awareness itself is not the path back. It is the first step of already being home. 2. Stillness is the doorway home. In Buddhism, stillness is not seen as laziness, emptiness, or escape from life. Stillness is understood as a sacred space where clarity naturally returns. Most people live in constant motion, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The mind jumps from thought to thought, memory to worry, comparison to expectation, without rest. Over time, this constant movement creates exhaustion and confusion, and people begin to feel disconnected from themselves. Buddhism teaches that this disconnection does not come from doing too little, but from never allowing ourselves to be still long enough to hear what is already inside us. Stillness is the doorway back to yourself because it removes the noise that keeps you distracted. When you stop reacting, fixing, chasing, or escaping, even for a few moments, you begin to notice what has always been present beneath the surface. At first, stillness may feel uncomfortable. The mind may resist it, bringing up restlessness, impatience, or buried emotions. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong, but a sign that you are finally listening. When the mind slows down, it reveals what constant busyness was hiding. Through stillness, you begin to see that peace is not something you need to create. It is something that naturally arises when you stop interfering with the present moment. You do not force calm, you allow it. Just as muddy water becomes clear when left undisturbed, the mind settles when given space. This is why meditation in Buddhism is not about controlling thoughts or becoming empty, but about sitting gently with whatever arises. Each breath becomes an anchor, bringing you back from the outer world into your inner home. Stillness also reconnects you with your body. When life moves too fast, you live mostly in your head, disconnected from physical sensations and emotional signals. In stillness, you notice your breathing, your posture, your tension, and your fatigue. These sensations are not distractions, they are messages. The body remembers what the mind forgets. By sitting quietly, you begin to feel grounded again, as if you are finally standing on solid ground instead of constantly being pulled in different directions. Buddhism reminds us that stillness is not found only on meditation cushions or in monasteries. It can exist in simple moments throughout the day. A quiet breath before responding, a pause before reacting, a few seconds of awareness while walking or eating. Each moment of stillness is a doorway that leads you back to yourself. You do not need to withdraw from life to return home. You only need to stop long enough to arrive. As you practice stillness, you may begin to notice something deeply comforting. The self you were searching for has not gone anywhere. It has been waiting patiently beneath the noise, untouched by chaos or pressure. Stillness allows you to meet yourself again, not as a problem to solve, but as a presence to rest in. In this way, stillness is not an escape from life. It is the doorway through which you return to living with awareness, balance, and inner peace. 3. Let go of who you were trying to be. Buddhism teaches that one of the deepest sources of suffering is attachment to identity, especially the identity we believe we must maintain in order to be accepted, respected, or safe. From a young age, many of us learn to shape ourselves around expectations. We learn who to be to receive love, approval, and belonging. Over time, this shaping becomes so familiar that we forget it was something we learned, not something we truly are. Inner homecoming begins when you realize that much of your exhaustion comes from trying to hold together an image of yourself that no longer fits. You may notice that you are constantly managing how others see you, measuring your worth through productivity, success, strength, or emotional control. Even spiritual growth can sometimes turn into another role to perform, another version of yourself to perfect. Buddhism gently invites you to see this struggle without blame. There is nothing wrong with wanting to improve your life, but suffering arises when improvement becomes a condition for self-acceptance. When you believe you must become someone else before you are allowed to rest, you remain endlessly restless. Letting go of who you were trying to be does not mean giving up on responsibility or growth. It means releasing the rigid story you tell yourself about who you must be at all times. It means loosening your grip on labels such as strong, successful, broken, failed, spiritual, or unworthy. These labels may feel real, but Buddhism teaches that they are temporary mental constructions, not your true nature. When you cling to them, you create tension. When you soften your attachment to them, your breath naturally deepens and your body begins to relax. Inner homecoming happens when you allow yourself to exist without performance. This may feel unfamiliar at first, even frightening, because the mind has learned to equate identity with safety. You may wonder who you are without the roles you play or the expectations you carry. Buddhism does not rush this question. It simply invites you to sit with it gently. In that space of not knowing, something honest begins to emerge. You start to feel lighter, less burdened, more real. As you let go of the person you were trying so hard to be, you may notice a quiet relief spreading through your inner world. You no longer need to prove your worth or justify your existence. You begin to experience yourself as you are, moment by moment, without judgment. This is not loss, it is liberation. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found in becoming more, but in clinging less. When you release the weight of false identity, you make space for your true self to return. Letting go is not an act of force. It is a gentle unwinding. Each time you notice yourself striving, performing, or pretending, and choose instead to breathe and soften, you come back to yourself. Inner homecoming is not about constructing a better identity, but about remembering that you were never required to be anything other than present. When you stop trying to become someone else, you finally give yourself permission to come home. 4. Your body knows the way back. Buddhism teaches that wisdom does not live only in thoughts or ideas, but in direct experience, and the body is one of the most honest teachers we have. Long before the mind understands what is happening, the body responds. It tightens when something feels unsafe, it becomes heavy when you are overwhelmed, and it softens when you feel aligned and at peace. Many people feel disconnected from themselves because they have learned to ignore these signals in order to keep functioning. Inner homecoming begins when you remember that your body has always been communicating with you, patiently and truthfully. In daily life, we are often encouraged to push through fatigue, dismiss emotional discomfort, and override our physical limits. Over time, this creates a deep split between mind and body. You may continue moving forward, achieving and surviving, while your body quietly carries tension, exhaustion, and unexpressed emotion. Buddhism does not view this as weakness. It sees it as a natural response to living in a world that values speed and productivity over presence. The body becomes a storage place for everything the mind refuses to pause and feel. When you begin to slow down and pay attention, the body gently guides you back to yourself. You may notice tightness in your chest, heaviness in your shoulders, or shallow breathing. These are not problems to fix. They are messages asking for awareness. Buddhism teaches that awareness itself is healing. When you notice a sensation without resisting or judging it, the body often begins to release on its own. This is because the body feels safe when it is finally heard. Inner homecoming through the body happens in simple ways. It happens when you notice your breath and allow it to deepen naturally, when you rest without guilt, and when you respect your need for boundaries. It happens when you stop forcing yourself to be strong all the time and allow yourself to feel what is present. The body responds to kindness more deeply than to discipline. When treated with care, it becomes a doorway back to presence rather than a source of discomfort. Buddhism also teaches that the present moment is always experienced through the body. You do not live in yesterday or tomorrow physically. You live here, now, through sensation. By reconnecting with your body, you anchor yourself in reality rather than in mental stories. Walking, breathing, eating, and resting become acts of mindfulness when done with awareness. Each sensation becomes a reminder that you are alive, grounded, and here. As you learn to listen to your body, you may discover something reassuring. The body has never left you, even when you felt disconnected. It has been carrying you, protecting you, and signaling your needs all along. Inner homecoming does not require forcing awareness, it requires trust. When you trust your body's wisdom and respond with patience, you begin to feel whole again. In this way, your body is not something to overcome or control, but a guide that gently leads you back home to yourself. 5. Compassion is how you welcome yourself home. Buddhism teaches that compassion is not weakness, indulgence, or self-pity. It is one of the deepest forms of wisdom. Many people try to change themselves through pressure, self-criticism, and harsh discipline, believing that being hard on themselves will lead to growth. Instead, this approach often creates more distance from the self. Inner homecoming does not happen through force. You cannot return to yourself by shaming the parts of you that struggled, survived, or became lost along the way. Buddhism reminds us that the way back home is paved with gentleness. When you look at your past, you may see moments where you feel disappointed, ashamed, or frustrated with yourself. You may judge the choices you made, the people you trusted, or the ways you reacted under pressure. Buddhism invites you to look at these moments through the lens of compassion rather than blame. Every version of you was doing the best it could with the awareness, resources, and emotional capacity available at the time. When you see this clearly, the grip of self-judgment begins to soften. Compassion begins with how you speak to yourself internally. Many people carry a constant inner voice that criticizes, compares, and demands improvement. This voice may sound familiar because it often reflects what you were taught, not what is true. Buddhism teaches mindful awareness of this inner dialogue. When you notice harsh self-talk, you do not fight it or try to silence it aggressively. You observe it with understanding, recognizing that it developed as a way to protect you or push you forward. Through awareness, compassion naturally arises. Welcoming yourself home means allowing all parts of you to exist without rejection. This includes the anxious parts, the tired parts, the fearful parts, and even the parts you wish were different. Buddhism does not ask you to love everything instantly. It asks you to stop pushing parts of yourself away. When you allow yourself to be fully present with your own experience, even discomfort begins to soften. Compassion creates a sense of inner safety, and safety allows healing to occur. Buddhism also teaches compassion through the practice of loving kindness, which begins with oneself. This practice reminds us that we cannot offer genuine understanding to others if we constantly abandon ourselves. When you treat yourself with patience, your nervous system relaxes, your breath becomes steadier, your emotions feel less overwhelming. This is not because problems disappear, but because you are no longer facing them alone. You become your own refuge. As compassion deepens, inner homecoming becomes less about effort and more about relationship. You begin to relate to yourself as you would to someone you care about deeply, with curiosity, forgiveness, and respect. Mistakes become teachers instead of evidence of failure. Pain becomes something to tend to rather than suppress. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found in becoming perfect, but in ending the inner war. When you welcome yourself with compassion, something profound happens. You stop running from yourself. You stop needing to be someone else in order to feel worthy of peace. Inner homecoming becomes a natural unfolding rather than a struggle. Compassion opens the door, and when you step through it, you realize that the home you were searching for has always been waiting for you, patient and unchanged, ready to receive you exactly as you are. 6. Stop searching, start sitting with what is. One of the most subtle but powerful teachings in Buddhism is that much of our suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our resistance to the present moment. We are constantly searching for something else to make us feel complete, a different situation, a different version of ourselves, a different future where things finally make sense. This endless searching creates the feeling that something is missing right now, that this moment is not enough, and that peace exists somewhere else. Inner homecoming begins when you gently question this habit of searching and begin to sit with what is already here. From early on, many of us learn to believe that happiness is always just ahead of us. When this problem is solved, when that goal is reached, when this feeling goes away, then we will finally be okay. Buddhism teaches that this mindset keeps the mind restless and dissatisfied, even during good moments. The mind becomes trained to reject the present, constantly leaning forward into the next moment. Over time, this creates a quiet anxiety, a sense of always being slightly out of place in your own life. You are physically here, but mentally elsewhere. Sitting with what is does not mean giving up on growth or accepting harmful situations. It means stopping the inner fight against your current experience. When you allow yourself to fully acknowledge what you are feeling without immediately trying to change it, something begins to shift. Sadness no longer needs to be pushed away. Fear no longer needs to be hidden. Even confusion can be held with patience. Buddhism teaches that emotions become overwhelming not because they are too strong, but because we resist them. When resistance softens, emotions move through us more naturally. At first, sitting with what is may feel uncomfortable. The mind may protest, saying that if you do not fix or escape this moment, you will be stuck forever. Buddhism gently reassures us that this fear is an illusion. Nothing stays the same forever, including discomfort. By allowing the present moment to exist without judgment, you create space for natural change. Just as a wave rises and falls on its own, emotions pass when they are not held tightly or pushed away. Inner homecoming happens when you realize that you do not need to search for peace in order to experience it. Peace arises when you stop arguing with reality. This does not mean you like everything that happens. It means you stop adding an extra layer of suffering by wishing things were different right now. Buddhism calls this acceptance, not resignation. Acceptance is an active presence with life as it is, rather than a passive surrender to harm. It is the difference between meeting life consciously and fighting it internally. When you sit with what is, you begin to notice subtle moments of calm that were previously overlooked. A quiet breath, a moment of stillness between thoughts, a sense of grounding in your body. These moments are not dramatic, but they are real. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not a distant event, but a deep intimacy with the present moment. Each time you choose to stay instead of escape, you strengthen your connection to yourself. Stopping the search also changes how you relate to pain. Instead of seeing pain as an enemy to defeat, you begin to see it as an experience to understand. This shift brings compassion and patience into your inner world. You stop measuring your progress by how little you feel and start measuring it by how honestly you can be present. This honesty becomes a form of courage. It takes strength to remain with yourself when there is no distraction to hide behind. As you practice sitting with what is, you may notice that the sense of lack slowly dissolves. You begin to feel more grounded, more whole, not because life has become perfect, but because you are no longer abandoning yourself in each moment. Inner homecoming is not about reaching a better place. It is about arriving fully where you already are. When you stop searching for yourself somewhere else, you discover that you have been here all along, waiting patiently for your attention. In this way, Buddhism teaches that the greatest return is not to a new life, but to this life, lived with awareness. When you sit with what is, without resistance or escape, you are no longer running. You are home. 7. Returning is a daily practice, not a one-time event. Buddhism teaches that coming back to yourself is not a single moment of awakening that permanently fixes everything. It is not a dramatic realization after which life becomes effortless and peaceful forever. Inner homecoming is a living practice, something that unfolds slowly through repetition, patience, and honest attention. Many people feel discouraged when they notice themselves drifting again after moments of clarity, but Buddhism reminds us that drifting is not failure. Drifting is part of being human. The practice is not about never leaving, but about learning how to return again and again without self-judgment. In daily life, the world constantly pulls your attention outward. Responsibilities, relationships, expectations, memories, and fears all compete for your energy. Even after moments of deep awareness, it is natural to fall back into old habits of distraction, overthinking, and emotional reactivity. Buddhism does not expect you to rise above this permanently. Instead, it teaches that wisdom grows through noticing when you have been pulled away and gently guiding yourself back. Each return strengthens your relationship with yourself. Inner homecoming as a daily practice means learning to recognize subtle signs of disconnection. You may notice irritability without knowing why, a sense of rushing even when nothing is urgent, or a feeling of emptiness despite being busy. These are not flaws, they are signals. Buddhism encourages you to listen to these signs as invitations to pause rather than problems to solve. The moment you notice disconnection with awareness, the return has already begun. This practice shows itself in small, ordinary moments rather than grand spiritual experiences. It appears when you take one conscious breath before responding emotionally. It appears when you choose rest instead of pushing yourself past your limits. It appears when you notice your mind creating stories and gently bring your attention back to the present. Buddhism teaches that these small moments of awareness are more transformative than occasional intense experiences because they slowly reshape how you live. Returning daily also means accepting that some days will feel clearer than others. There will be days when presence feels natural and days when the mind feels heavy and restless. Buddhism teaches non-attachment even to peace itself. When you cling to calm states and resist difficult ones, you create new suffering. Instead, you are invited to meet each day as it is, with openness and patience. The goal is not to maintain a perfect inner state, but to remain in relationship with your experience. As inner homecoming becomes a daily practice, your relationship with suffering begins to change. Instead of seeing difficult emotions as signs that something is wrong, you begin to see them as part of the path. Pain becomes something you walk with rather than something you fight against. Buddhism teaches that suffering loses much of its power when it is met with awareness and compassion. You may still feel sadness, fear, or frustration, but you are no longer consumed by them. You remain grounded in yourself even while emotions pass through. Returning daily also deepens your sense of trust. You begin to trust that no matter how far you feel from yourself, the way back is always available. You do not need perfect conditions to return. You can return in the middle of chaos, exhaustion, or confusion. A single breath, a moment of honesty, or a pause in reaction is enough to reconnect. This trust slowly dissolves the fear of being lost forever. Buddhism emphasizes mindfulness not as a technique, but as a way of living. When inner homecoming becomes part of daily life, mindfulness naturally flows into how you speak, listen, and relate to others. You become less reactive, not because you suppress emotion, but because you recognize it early. You become more compassionate, not because you force kindness, but because you understand suffering more deeply. Your presence becomes steady, grounded, and sincere. Over time, you may notice that the sense of separation you once felt begins to fade. You no longer experience yourself as someone who occasionally finds peace and then loses it. Instead, you experience peace as something that comes and goes within a larger field of awareness that remains stable. Buddhism teaches that this awareness is your true refuge. It is not dependent on circumstances, moods, or achievements. It is always available beneath the surface of experience. Returning daily also reshapes how you view your life story. Instead of seeing your past as a series of mistakes or failures, you begin to see it as a path that led you here. Every moment of confusion, struggle, and distraction becomes part of your understanding. Buddhism does not ask you to reject your past self. It asks you to include it with compassion. In doing so, you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You become whole. Inner homecoming as a daily practice teaches humility. You learn that growth is not linear and that wisdom deepens through patience rather than force. Each return strengthens your ability to remain present longer, respond more gently, and listen more deeply. Even when you forget, you remember that forgetting is temporary. This realization brings a quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation. Eventually, you may realize something simple and profound. You are no longer chasing the idea of being home. You are living from it. Home is no longer a feeling you try to maintain, but a relationship you nurture. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found in escaping the human experience, but in meeting it fully with awareness. When returning becomes a daily practice, life itself becomes the path. In this way, inner homecoming is not a destination you reach once and keep forever. It is a gentle rhythm of leaving and returning again and again. Each return is an act of kindness toward yourself. Each return deepens your sense of belonging within your own life. And through this daily practice, you come to understand that no matter how many times you wander, the way back has always been waiting, quietly and patiently, within you. 8. Make yourself your own safe place. Buddhism teaches that one of the deepest longings of the human heart is the need for safety, not only physical safety, but emotional and inner safety. Many people spend their entire lives searching for this sense of safety in relationships, achievements, routines, beliefs, or future plans. They hope that if the right person stays, if the right goal is reached, or if life finally becomes stable, they will feel at peace inside. Yet again and again, life changes, people change, and circumstances shift. Inner homecoming begins when you understand that lasting safety cannot be outsourced. It must be cultivated within. From early life, we often learn to look outside ourselves for reassurance. We learn to read other people's moods, adjust our behavior to avoid conflict, and suppress parts of ourselves to maintain connection. Over time, this creates a pattern where your nervous system feels calm only when external conditions feel controlled. Buddhism gently points out that this makes inner peace fragile because it depends on things you cannot fully manage. When safety lives outside of you, anxiety becomes constant, even in moments that appear calm. Making yourself your own safe place does not mean isolating from others or rejecting support. It means developing an inner relationship that remains steady regardless of what happens around you. Buddhism teaches that safety arises when awareness meets experience without judgment. When you stop fighting your own thoughts and emotions, your inner world begins to feel less threatening. You no longer see yourself as something to fix or control, but as something to care for. This inner safety begins with permission. Permission to feel what you feel without rushing to explain it away. Permission to rest without earning it. Permission to say no without guilt. Many people live with an internal pressure that never turns off, a constant sense of needing to be better, calmer, stronger, or more spiritual. Buddhism teaches that this pressure is not truth, but conditioning. When you allow yourself to exist without constant self-correction, your body and mind begin to relax. Safety grows in this relaxation. As you practice making yourself your own safe place, you start to notice how often you abandon yourself in moments of discomfort. When anxiety arises, the instinct may be to distract yourself, judge yourself, or push the feeling away. Buddhism invites a different response. Instead of leaving yourself in those moments, you stay. You bring attention to your breath, your body, and the present moment. You silently remind yourself that it is okay to feel what you are feeling. This staying is an act of deep self-respect. Over time, this practice rewires how you experience difficulty. Emotions that once felt overwhelming become more manageable because you are no longer facing them alone. You become the steady presence that meets fear with patience, sadness with gentleness, and uncertainty with openness. Buddhism teaches that when awareness holds experience, suffering loosens its grip. Not because pain disappears, but because it is held in a larger space of understanding. Inner safety also transforms how you relate to others. When you are no longer desperately seeking safety from outside sources, relationships become less heavy. You stop clinging, proving, or overgiving to secure connection. Instead, you show up more honestly. You speak more clearly. You set boundaries without hostility. Buddhism teaches that true compassion for others grows naturally when you are no longer neglecting yourself. When you feel safe within, you stop demanding that others complete you. Making yourself your own safe place does not require perfection. There will still be moments of fear, doubt, and emotional pain. Buddhism does not promise a life free from difficulty. What it offers is a way to remain present and grounded even when life is uncertain. Each time you respond to yourself with patience instead of panic, you strengthen this inner refuge. Each time you choose understanding over self-attack, you deepen it. As this inner safety grows, you may notice a subtle but powerful shift. You begin to trust yourself more. You trust that you can handle discomfort without collapsing. You trust that you can survive uncertainty without losing yourself. This trust becomes a quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation. Buddhism teaches that this confidence is not arrogance, but inner stability. Eventually, inner homecoming reaches a point where you no longer feel like you are constantly bracing against life. You feel rooted, you feel present. You feel able to meet whatever arises with awareness rather than fear. Making yourself your own safe place does not mean life becomes predictable. It means you become resilient, grounded, and compassionate within unpredictability. In this way, Buddhism teaches that the greatest refuge is not found in escaping the world, but in befriending your own experience. When you become your own safe place, you stop running, stop hiding, and stop abandoning yourself. You learn that no matter where you are or what you face, you carry home within you, and that realization is one of the deepest forms of freedom. 9. Live from home, not toward it. Buddhism teaches that the deepest transformation happens when you stop living as if peace is somewhere ahead of you and begin living from the place of inner homecoming you have already touched. Many people approach spiritual growth as a journey toward a future version of themselves, believing that one day they will finally arrive at calm, clarity, and wholeness. While intention and practice matter, this mindset can quietly keep you feeling incomplete in the present. Inner homecoming matures when you realize that the goal was never to reach home someday, but to recognize that home is the ground you are already standing on. Living from home means allowing your inner awareness to guide how you move through daily life, rather than treating peace as a reward you earn later. It means that instead of asking, "How do I become more centered?" you begin asking, "How do I respond to this moment from the center that is already here?" This shift may seem subtle, but it changes everything. You stop postponing your sense of belonging and begin embodying it in ordinary moments, through the way you breathe, speak, listen, and choose. For many people, life has become a constant state of reaching for success, approval, security, understanding, or control. Even personal growth can become another form of reaching, another attempt to fix what feels lacking. Buddhism gently points out that this constant reaching reinforces the belief that you are not enough as you are. Living from home invites you to rest in sufficiency. This does not mean you stop learning or growing. It means growth happens from fullness rather than deficiency. When you live from home, your relationship with effort changes. You still take action, but your actions are no longer fueled by fear or self-rejection. You work, create, and contribute not to prove your worth, but because it feels natural to express what is alive within you. Buddhism teaches that right action flows from right awareness. When awareness is grounded, actions become clearer and less exhausting. You stop forcing yourself forward and start moving with life instead of against it. This way of living also reshapes how you experience challenges. Difficult situations no longer feel like threats to your identity or proof that you are failing. Instead, they become experiences that arise within a stable inner space. You may still feel discomfort, disappointment, or grief, but these emotions do not define you. Buddhism teaches that when you are rooted in awareness, emotions pass through you rather than consuming you. Living from home allows you to meet difficulty without losing yourself. Living from home also means allowing life to be imperfect without constant resistance. Many people believe they must wait until things settle down before they can feel at peace. But life rarely settles in the way the mind expects. Buddhism teaches that peace is not the absence of chaos, but the ability to remain present within it. When you live from home, you stop waiting for ideal conditions. You learn to sit, stand, walk, and breathe fully within the conditions that exist now. This practice deeply affects how you relate to time. Instead of rushing toward the future or clinging to the past, you begin to experience time as a series of present moments, each complete in itself. You still plan and remember, but you no longer live inside those thoughts. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is the only place life actually happens. Living from home means inhabiting this moment fully, without mentally escaping it. Over time, this brings a sense of spaciousness and ease that cannot be manufactured. Living from home also changes how you treat yourself when you struggle. Instead of viewing setbacks as failures, you see them as part of the human rhythm of forgetting and remembering. You become quicker to forgive yourself and slower to judge. Buddhism emphasizes patience not as passive tolerance, but as deep trust in the unfolding of life. When you live from home, patience becomes natural because you are no longer in a hurry to become someone else. This way of living transforms your relationships as well. When you are grounded in yourself, you no longer seek others to complete you or save you from discomfort. You connect from wholeness rather than need. This allows for deeper honesty and healthier boundaries. You can be present with others without losing yourself, and you can be alone without feeling abandoned. Buddhism teaches that true connection arises when two people meet from a place of inner stability rather than emotional dependence. Living from home also invites a new relationship with uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as something to eliminate, you begin to see it as an essential part of being alive. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to create fear, but to free you from false expectations. When you live from home, You accept that nothing is guaranteed, yet you do not collapse into anxiety. You trust your capacity to meet change with awareness. This trust becomes a quiet strength that carries you through life's unpredictability. As this practice deepens, you may notice that your sense of identity becomes softer and more flexible. You are less attached to rigid self-definitions and more open to experience. You stop needing to constantly explain who you are. Buddhism teaches that the self is not a fixed object, but a living process. Living from home means participating in this process consciously, without clinging to any single version of yourself. Eventually, living from home becomes less about effort and more about remembering. You remember to pause when you are overwhelmed. You remember to breathe when emotions intensify. You remember that awareness is always available, even when the mind feels chaotic. These small acts of remembering anchor you, again and again, in the present. Each time you remember, you come home not as an event, but as a way of being. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found by escaping life, but by meeting it fully with awareness. Living from home means allowing life to move through you while remaining rooted in yourself. It means you no longer live as if peace is something you must chase or earn. You live as if peace is something you allow. In this way, inner homecoming reaches its deepest expression. You are no longer trying to return to yourself. You are living as yourself, moment by moment, with honesty, presence, and compassion. Home is no longer a memory or a goal. It is the quiet stability from which you meet each experience. And when you live from home rather than toward it, life itself becomes a continuous act of belonging. 10. Let life move through you without losing yourself. Buddhism teaches that much of our inner conflict comes from trying to control life instead of learning how to move with it. From a very young age, many of us are taught that safety comes from holding on tightly, planning ahead, and protecting ourselves from uncertainty. While some level of structure is necessary, this habit can quietly turn into resistance against life itself. Inner homecoming deepens when you stop bracing against experience and allow life to move through you without abandoning who you are. Letting life move through you does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means releasing the constant inner tension that comes from trying to manage everything emotionally. Many people confuse openness with weakness, but Buddhism teaches that openness is a form of strength. When you are open, you are present. When you are present, you are able to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. Resistance tightens the mind and body, while openness allows clarity to arise naturally. One of the main reasons people feel disconnected from themselves is that they are constantly resisting what they feel. When sadness appears, they try to suppress it. When fear arises, they judge it. When joy comes, they cling to it. Buddhism teaches that this pushing and pulling creates suffering. Emotions are not meant to be controlled or possessed. They are meant to be experienced and released. When you allow emotions to pass through you without labeling them as good or bad, you remain grounded in yourself even as feelings change. Inner homecoming means learning to stay present while life unfolds, without gripping tightly or pushing away. This can feel challenging at first, especially if you are used to protecting yourself by shutting down or overthinking. The mind may believe that if you let go of control, everything will fall apart. Buddhism gently reassures us that life is already unfolding on its own. Your task is not to control it, but to meet it with awareness. Letting life move through you also means allowing change without panic. Everything in life is impermanent, including emotions, relationships, roles, and circumstances. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to create fear, but to help you stop clinging to what cannot stay the same. When you cling, you suffer. When you accept change as a natural process, you remain flexible and present. Inner homecoming happens when you stop demanding that life remain predictable and instead develop trust in your ability to meet whatever arises. As you practice this, you may notice that your reactions begin to soften. Situations that once triggered intense emotional responses may still affect you, but they no longer pull you away from yourself completely. You remain aware of your breath, your body, and your inner state even while engaging with the world. Buddhism teaches that this balance is the heart of wisdom, being fully engaged without being consumed. Letting life move through you also transforms how you experience pain. Pain becomes an experience rather than an identity. You may feel hurt, disappointed, or grief-stricken, but you do not become those feelings. You recognize them as passing states within a larger field of awareness. This awareness is your true home. When you stay connected to it, pain does not erase your sense of self. It becomes something you move through with compassion and patience. This practice also brings a deep sense of humility. You begin to see that you do not need to have everything figured out in order to live fully. Uncertainty becomes something you can sit with, rather than something you must eliminate. Buddhism teaches that not knowing is not a problem. It is an invitation to stay present. When you let go of the need for constant certainty, your inner world becomes more spacious and calm. Letting life move through you also means allowing joy without fear. Many people unconsciously resist joy because they are afraid of losing it. Buddhism teaches that joy, like all experiences, is impermanent. When you accept this, you can enjoy joy fully without clinging. You experience happiness more freely because you are not trying to trap it or protect it. You allow it to come and go, just like everything else. As inner homecoming deepens, you may notice that you feel more alive rather than less controlled. You are no longer living in constant defense mode. You are responsive, aware, and grounded. Life feels richer because you are no longer filtering it through constant fear or resistance. Buddhism teaches that when you stop fighting life, life meets you with less struggle. Letting life move through you does not mean losing boundaries or self-respect. In fact, it strengthens them. When you are present and grounded, you are more aware of what feels right and what does not. You say yes and no more clearly. You step away from what harms you without anger or guilt. Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes from inner clarity, not from external control. Over time, this way of living creates a deep sense of trust. You trust your ability to remain present even when life is uncertain. You trust that emotions will pass. You trust that awareness will guide you back when you drift. This trust becomes a quiet strength that does not need to prove itself. It simply exists. Inner homecoming reaches its fullest expression when you can allow life to flow through you without losing your center. You are no longer rigid or collapsed. You are open yet rooted, flexible yet stable. Buddhism teaches that this is the middle way, neither clinging nor rejecting, neither escaping nor controlling. When you live this way, you do not disappear into life, and life does not overwhelm you. In this state, you are not trying to protect yourself from experience, nor are you dissolving into it. You are participating fully while remaining anchored in awareness. This is the art of living from home. Life moves, changes, surprises, and challenges you, but you remain present within it. And in that presence, you discover that you do not need to hold life tightly to feel safe. You simply need to stay connected to yourself. This is one of the deepest gifts of Buddhist inner homecoming, the ability to let life move through you while you remain whole, present, and deeply at peace within yourself. 11. Remember yourself gently, again and again. Buddhism teaches that remembering yourself is not an act of force, discipline, or pressure. It is a gentle return that happens through patience, kindness, and repeated awareness. Many people believe that once they understand a teaching or experience a moment of clarity, they should be able to remain centered forever. When they find themselves drifting again into distraction, fear, or emotional turbulence, they feel discouraged and assume they are failing. Buddhism offers a much kinder truth. Forgetting is not failure. Forgetting is part of being human. What matters is how gently you remember yourself when you notice you have wandered. Life is designed in a way that constantly pulls your attention outward. Sounds, responsibilities, emotions, memories, and expectations compete for your focus every day. Even with the deepest intentions, it is natural to become absorbed in thinking, reacting, and surviving. Buddhism does not demand that you escape this reality. Instead, it teaches you how to return to awareness without turning that return into another burden. Remembering yourself is not a task to complete, it is a relationship you renew. This remembrance often begins in the simplest moments. A breath taken consciously, a pause before speaking, a realization that your shoulders are tense and can soften. These moments may seem small, but Buddhism teaches that small moments shape the quality of your entire life. Each time you remember yourself, even briefly, you strengthen the pathway back to presence. Over time, this pathway becomes familiar, like a trail you have walked many times before. Remembering yourself gently means releasing the belief that you must punish yourself for drifting. Harsh self-correction creates fear, and fear pushes you further away from presence. Buddhism teaches that awareness thrives in safety. When you notice distraction and respond with kindness instead of criticism, your nervous system relaxes. In that relaxation, clarity returns naturally. You do not force yourself back home, you invite yourself. This gentle remembrance also changes how you relate to difficult emotions. When pain arises, the instinct may be to escape, analyze, or suppress it. Buddhism encourages you to remember yourself in the midst of discomfort, not by fixing the feeling, but by staying present with it. You notice your breath, you notice the sensation in your body. You remind yourself that this experience, too, is part of being alive. In doing so, you remain connected to yourself, even while emotions move through you. Over time, remembering yourself gently builds trust. You begin to trust that no matter how intense or confusing a moment becomes, you can return to awareness. You trust that you are not lost beyond recovery. This trust softens fear and reduces panic. Buddhism teaches that confidence does not come from control, but from knowing that you can come back to yourself whenever needed. This practice also reshapes how you experience time. Instead of measuring your growth by how long you stay present, you measure it by how kindly you return when you forget. Each return becomes an act of compassion. Each return deepens your sense of belonging within yourself. You stop rushing toward an imagined state of perfection and start honoring the reality of your lived experience. Remembering yourself gently also allows space for humility. You accept that you are learning, that growth unfolds slowly, and that setbacks are not signs of weakness. Buddhism teaches that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but seeing yourself clearly without illusion. When you see yourself honestly, you treat yourself more gently. This gentleness becomes the foundation for real transformation. As this practice deepens, you may notice that your inner dialogue begins to change. The voice that once judged and pressured you becomes quieter. In its place, a softer awareness emerges, one that notices without attacking. This shift does not happen overnight. It happens through repetition. Each gentle return weakens the old patterns and strengthens new ones rooted in presence. Remembering yourself again and again also brings a quiet joy. Not the excitement of achievement, but the calm joy of familiarity. You begin to recognize yourself beneath the layers of stress and identity. You feel at home in your own awareness. This feeling does not depend on circumstances. It arises from knowing that you are here, present, and alive. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not a single dramatic moment, but a continuous remembering. Each moment of awareness is complete in itself. You do not need to collect them or build towards something greater. Each moment you remember yourself, you are fully here. That is enough. As you live this way, remembering yourself gently throughout the day, inner homecoming becomes woven into your life. You no longer separate spiritual practice from ordinary moments. Washing your hands, listening to someone speak, walking down the street, or sitting quietly all become opportunities to return. Life itself becomes the reminder. In the end, Buddhism does not ask you to never forget yourself. It asks you to remember that remembering is always possible. No matter how far you wander, the path back is never blocked. It is always one breath, one pause, one moment of awareness away. When you remember yourself gently, again and again, you discover that home is not something you must reach. It is something you continuously return to with patience, honesty, and compassion. 12. Let home become the way you live. Buddhism teaches that inner homecoming reaches its deepest expression when it stops being something you practice only in quiet moments and becomes the way you live your entire life. At first, coming back to yourself may feel like a deliberate effort, something you do during meditation, reflection, or moments of emotional overwhelm. Over time, however, this return begins to soften into a natural rhythm. You are no longer switching between being present and being lost. Presence slowly weaves itself into how you move, choose, speak, and rest. Home is no longer a place you visit. It becomes the ground from which you live. Many people believe that spiritual understanding should remove difficulty from life. When challenges continue to appear, they assume they are doing something wrong or not practicing correctly. Buddhism offers a very different understanding. It teaches that the goal is not to escape life's waves, but to learn how to stand steadily as they move through you. Letting home become the way you live means that even when life feels demanding, uncertain, or painful, you do not abandon yourself. You remain rooted in awareness, allowing experience to unfold without losing your center. This way of living begins with honesty. You stop pretending to be calmer than you are. You stop forcing positivity when you feel tired or overwhelmed. Buddhism teaches that truthfulness toward your inner experience is a form of wisdom. When you are honest with yourself, you create inner alignment. There is no longer a gap between what you feel and how you live. This alignment brings a quiet sense of integrity that feels deeply grounding. As home becomes your way of living, your relationship with effort changes. You still make plans, pursue goals, and take responsibility, but the energy behind these actions is different. You are no longer driven by fear of being inadequate or left behind. You act from clarity rather than pressure. Buddhism teaches that action rooted in awareness is sustainable, while action rooted in fear leads to exhaustion. When home lives within you, effort becomes lighter, more focused, and more compassionate. Letting home become the way you live also reshapes how you experience rest. Rest is no longer something you allow, only when everything is finished. It becomes something you weave into your day through pauses, mindful breathing, and gentle attention. Buddhism reminds us that constant striving disconnects us from ourselves. When you allow moments of rest without guilt, you reinforce your sense of inner safety. Rest becomes an act of respect rather than a reward. This way of living deeply affects how you relate to others. When you are at home within yourself, you listen more fully because you are not distracted by the need to be seen or validated. You speak more honestly because you are not afraid of losing approval. You give more freely because you are not giving to fill an inner emptiness. Buddhism teaches that relationships become healthier when they are expressions of wholeness rather than attempts to complete ourselves. Letting home become the way you live also transforms how you meet conflict. Instead of reacting immediately from habit or emotion, you pause, you feel your body, you notice your breath. This pause creates space between stimulus and response. Buddhism teaches that freedom lives in this space. When you respond from awareness rather than impulse, your words become clearer and your actions more intentional. Even difficult conversations can be met with steadiness. Over time, you may notice that your sense of identity becomes quieter. You are less invested in defending who you think you are. Praise and criticism affect you less deeply because your sense of worth no longer depends on them. Buddhism teaches that attachment to identity is a major source of suffering. When home lives within you, identity becomes flexible rather than rigid. You can adapt without losing yourself. Letting home become the way you live also changes how you experience solitude. Being alone no longer feels empty or threatening. It becomes nourishing. You enjoy your own presence because you are no longer running from yourself. Buddhism teaches that solitude reveals whether we are at peace within. When you feel at home inside, solitude becomes a place of restoration rather than loneliness. This way of living does not mean you will always feel calm. Emotions will still rise and fall. Life will still surprise you. The difference is that you no longer take these fluctuations personally. You see them as part of the human experience rather than evidence that something is wrong. Buddhism teaches equanimity, the ability to remain balanced amid change. When home becomes your way of living, equanimity grows naturally. As the practice deepens, you may realize that you are no longer searching for meaning in the same way. Meaning begins to reveal itself in simple moments. Breathing consciously, being present with someone you care about, doing ordinary tasks with attention. Buddhism teaches that meaning is not something added to life. It is discovered through presence. When you live from home, even ordinary moments feel quietly significant. Letting home become the way you live also requires patience. Old habits will return. You will forget. You will react. Buddhism does not see this as regression. It sees it as part of the learning process. Each time you notice and return, you strengthen your ability to live from awareness. Over time, the returns become quicker and gentler. You spend less time lost and more time present, not because you force it, but because presence feels natural. Eventually, inner homecoming stops feeling like a practice and starts feeling like your true orientation in life. You are no longer oriented toward proving, fixing, or becoming. You are oriented toward being. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not an escape from life, but full participation in it without self-abandonment. When home becomes the way you live, you meet life directly, openly, and honestly. In this way, inner homecoming completes its circle. You are not retreating from the world, nor are you lost within it. You are standing within your life, rooted in awareness, allowing each moment to come and go. Home is no longer behind you or ahead of you. It is here, now, expressed through how you live, breathe, and relate. And when you live this way, life itself becomes a continuous return to yourself. 13. Trust the quiet wisdom that is already within you. Buddhism teaches that beneath all confusion, fear, and searching, there is a quiet wisdom already living within you. This wisdom does not shout, it does not rush, it does not demand attention. It waits patiently, often unnoticed, beneath layers of thought, emotion, conditioning, and habit. Many people believe they must acquire wisdom through endless learning, effort, or external guidance. But Buddhism gently reminds us that true wisdom is not something imported into your life. It is something uncovered when you stop drowning it out. From a very young age, most of us are trained to trust external authority more than our own inner knowing. We are taught what to want, how to behave, what success looks like, and who we should become. Over time, this conditioning grows so loud that the inner voice becomes faint. You may begin to doubt your own feelings, instincts, and needs. You may ask others what you should do, even when you already sense the answer. Inner homecoming deepens when you begin to trust that your awareness holds insight, even when it feels subtle or uncertain. Quiet wisdom does not arrive as perfect clarity or certainty. Often, it shows up as a gentle nudge, a feeling of unease, or a sense of alignment that cannot be fully explained. Buddhism teaches that this wisdom is intuitive rather than intellectual. It lives in your body, your breath, and your felt sense of truth. When you slow down and listen inwardly, you may notice moments where something feels right or wrong without logical explanation. These moments are not accidents. They are expressions of inner wisdom trying to guide you. Trusting this wisdom requires patience because it unfolds slowly. The mind prefers quick answers and clear instructions, but quiet wisdom speaks in whispers. It asks you to pause, to feel, and to remain present long enough for understanding to arise naturally. Buddhism teaches that insight emerges when the mind becomes still enough to receive it. When you constantly seek answers outside yourself, you miss the subtle guidance already available within. Inner homecoming involves learning how to listen again. This listening is not about thinking harder, but about creating space. Space between thoughts, space between reactions, space between impulse and action. In this space, awareness deepens. You begin to notice patterns in your experience. You see what brings peace and what creates tension. You recognize when you are acting from fear versus clarity. This recognition is wisdom in action. Trusting your inner wisdom also means accepting that it may guide you away from familiar paths. Sometimes, quiet wisdom asks you to rest when the world tells you to push harder. Sometimes, it asks you to let go of relationships, roles, or goals that no longer align with who you are becoming. This can feel uncomfortable, especially if you are used to seeking validation from others. Buddhism teaches that following inner wisdom may not always bring immediate comfort, but it leads to deeper alignment and long-term peace. As you practice trusting this inner guidance, your confidence grows. Not the loud confidence of certainty or control, but a quiet confidence rooted in self-trust. You begin to trust your ability to meet life as it unfolds. You trust that even when you do not know exactly what to do, awareness will guide you step by step. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is not about having all the answers in advance. It is about responding skillfully to each moment as it arises. Quiet wisdom also teaches you when to act and when to wait. In a world that glorifies constant action, waiting is often misunderstood as weakness or indecision. Buddhism teaches that wise waiting is a form of deep listening. It allows situations to reveal themselves fully before you respond. When you trust this process, you stop forcing outcomes. You allow clarity to emerge naturally, often revealing options you could not see before. Trusting inner wisdom also transforms how you relate to mistakes. When something does not work out, you no longer see it as proof that you cannot trust yourself. Instead, you see it as part of learning. Buddhism teaches compassion toward oneself in the face of imperfection. Wisdom deepens not by avoiding mistakes, but by learning from experience with honesty and kindness. Each experience becomes a teacher rather than a judgment. As this trust grows, you may notice a shift in how you experience guidance from others. You still value teachers, books, and teachings, but you no longer surrender your authority to them. You listen, reflect, and then check inwardly. Buddhism encourages this balance. The Buddha himself taught people to test teachings against their own experience rather than accept them blindly. True wisdom integrates outer guidance with inner knowing. Over time, trusting your quiet wisdom brings a sense of ease into your life. Decisions feel less frantic. You feel less pulled in multiple directions. Even when life presents difficult choices, you approach them with steadiness rather than panic. You may still feel uncertainty, but you trust your capacity to navigate it. This trust becomes a form of inner refuge. Inner homecoming reaches a deeper level when you realize that wisdom is not separate from compassion. As you listen to yourself more deeply, you naturally become more understanding toward others. You recognize shared vulnerability. You see that everyone is navigating life with limited clarity. Buddhism teaches that wisdom without compassion is incomplete. When both grow together, your presence becomes calm, grounded, and supportive. Trusting your quiet wisdom does not mean life becomes easy or predictable. It means you are no longer at war with yourself. You stop overriding your own truth to fit expectations. You stop silencing your inner voice out of fear. Instead, you begin to live in alignment with what feels honest and real. This alignment brings a deep sense of integrity that cannot be given or taken away. In the end, Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about becoming deeply intimate with your own experience. Trusting the quiet wisdom within you is an act of returning to that intimacy. It is choosing presence over noise, listening over forcing, and truth over performance. When you trust this wisdom, you no longer feel like you are wandering through life without direction. You feel guided, not by certainty, but by awareness itself. This is one of the most profound forms of inner homecoming. You stop searching endlessly for answers outside yourself and begin to recognize the guidance that has been quietly waiting within you all along. And in that recognition, you find not only direction, but a deep sense of peace, belonging, and trust in your own path. Buddhism gently reminds us that inner homecoming is not a journey across distance, time, or achievement. It is a return in awareness. Everything you have been searching for, peace, clarity, belonging, and safety, was never missing. It was simply covered by noise, fear, habit, and the constant pull of the outer world. You did not lose yourself. You became distracted from yourself, and what can be distracted can always be remembered. Coming back to yourself does not require perfection, discipline, or force. It asks for honesty, patience, and gentleness. Each moment you pause, breathe, and notice your inner experience without judgment, you step back into alignment. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, compassion over self-criticism, and presence over escape, you return home again. Buddhism teaches that these small moments are not insignificant. They are the path itself. Inner homecoming does not mean life will stop challenging you. Pain, uncertainty, and change will continue to arise because they are part of being human. The difference is that you no longer face them from a place of abandonment. You face them rooted in yourself. You learn to let life move through you without losing your center, to feel deeply without being consumed, and to act without being driven by fear. Over time, home stops feeling like a place you must reach and becomes the way you live. You speak more honestly, you rest without guilt, you trust your inner wisdom. You relate to others from wholeness rather than need. You remember yourself gently, again and again, without punishment or urgency. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found in escaping the world, but in meeting it fully while remaining anchored in awareness. If there is one truth to carry forward, it is this: no matter how far you feel from yourself, the way back is always available. It is one breath away, one pause away, one moment of awareness away. You do not need to become someone else to return. You only need to stop leaving yourself behind. So take a breath now. Feel your body. Notice this moment. Let yourself arrive without effort. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are here. And in being here, you are already home.